Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about searching for a job in a different city from your law school. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Allison Monahan, and typically I'm with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together, we're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about searching for a job in a city that's different from the one where you go to law school. So welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Well, first off, why is this even a big deal? I mean, don't a lot of law schools claim that they're national and you can get a job anywhere?
Yes, I think they definitely claim that.
Do we believe that?
Not always. I think there are some schools where it's definitely easier than others. If you're in a top 20 school, you probably just generally are going to have more choices. But even in that situation, the school or the employers are looking at where in school, where you've had experience, where you're connected to. It all still matters, no matter where you're at school.
I think that's right. I mean, I think even at these, very highly ranked, very prestigious schools, sure, it's possible you can get a job anywhere you want. Definitely not impossible. But the reality is it's still going to be easier in your local market. If you're at school at Harvard and you want a job in Boston, well, that is pretty simple to do. If you're at Columbia or NYU, you want a job in New York, not hard. But then you get to these places that are a little bit more out of the way. And of course, it's just going to be harder for you to do interviews and harder for people to get there. And, I just think it's more difficult overall. It's certainly not impossible. But then there are all the other schools. And here it can be a real challenge, right?
Correct. And there are schools where they're not necessarily top schools nationally, but maybe they're considered really good schools for their market. And so, if you want to be in that city, it's still like a pretty good school to go to get a job. But if you're, let's say, at one of those schools and you don't want to be in that market, then it's definitely going to be more challenging.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think every market kind of has its top school. And, if you want to work in, say, St. Louis and you figure out which law school in St. Louis happens to be the best law school in the area, then getting a job there is probably going to be relatively straightforward. What I see sometimes happening is people are looking really closely at the rankings of schools that are not these very top schools and saying, oh, well, I should go, with this 50 over this 70, even though the 70 is in the area that I want to work in. That's right, isn't it? And I'm like, no, that's probably not right.
And generally, I just think it's a big mistake to take, decisions just based on a ranking, a number. This is slightly better than this, and what does better mean? So I definitely agree that, you kind of have to look at the big picture.
Right. Okay. So let's assume now that somebody is probably not at a very, very highly ranked national school, nor are they at the top school in their area or even a school in their area that they're planning to apply to. So, say, for example, I'm at a mid-ranked school somewhere in the country and I want to apply somewhere that's 3,000 miles away. What are the issues with doing this as a law student?
Well, I think that you need to look at it from the employer's perspective. So you need to say to yourself, what are the questions that they're going to ask when they see my materials? And maybe I don't have any obvious connection to this place, or, I'm obviously in law school somewhere else. So I think you need to say to yourself, I'm going to have to overcome that and be proactive about telling them why I want to be here. And there are steps that I need to take to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main questions a lot of people have, particularly this can be the case if you're applying in like a market that a lot of people do want to work in, like the California markets. A lot of them are notorious for being very, very, strict about these sort of things. Are you really serious about moving to this place if we give you the offer, or if we let you summer, if it's a big law situation, are you going to come and summer in LA or San Francisco and then decide to go back to wherever you're from? I think a lot of places have concerns about that, so they may not even make that offer unless you convince them otherwise. And also they're thinking, are you going to stay here, right?
Yeah, I think they're thinking long term because, most people are going to go to a place if they get an offer to, after 2L year, but maybe they're going to stay for a year or two, and that doesn't help the firm in terms of their, recruiting. They want people who are going to stay longer than that. So I think you're kind of telling them you want to be there for a significant amount of time. You want to start your career there, your life there. And that's really what you're saying. It's not necessarily even just about, okay, I will accept the offer after the summer.
Yeah, and I think this can be really tricky when you're dealing with other people involved. Say that you are in a relationship with a doctor, for example, and, maybe they have their residency for 3 or 4 years and you guys are going to get married and you want to move to that city and find a job. That I think could be a hard sell for a lot of places, because what employer necessarily wants to hire you, knowing that, okay, in 2 or 3 years, when this person's significant other finishes their residency, they're probably moving. It's not to say you can't overcome it, but I think that is something, that you're definitely going to be, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and that's all the stuff I would say you really need to think about going into it. Ask yourself all of these questions. How are they going to look? Ask other people how, what they think if you explain all the facts to them. And then you need to, one by one, be able to, alleviate any of their concerns about all these points.
Exactly. I mean, I think in addition to making the case that, you are going to seriously move to this place and you want to stay there. I mean, obviously no one can predict the future forever. No one expects you to do that. But, that you have a good faith, it's kind of like if you're thinking of civil procedure, like you're domiciled in this new area, you have an intention to stay there indefinitely. But beyond that, I mean, you may find obviously your connections in that market might be lacking. Maybe your legal knowledge could be lacking. If you're coming to California and you went to school somewhere else, you probably haven't studied a lot of California law. So that could be an issue for certain types of work. If you're going to do, say, you want to practice family law, but you have not studied community property. Well, you need to probably take a class in that, or at least do some CLE so that you are prepared to step into this new environment. On that note too, I mean, it might be harder for you to pass the bar elsewhere, or you might need to take another bar exam if you've already taken one. Again, these are not impossible, just things to think about. That's where the UBE can really come in handy. So, that gets you access to a lot of different states, which will make life a lot easier. And frankly, sometimes it's just harder to be admitted. Different places have weird character and fitness requirements. I remember when I was admitted in Massachusetts, I had to get a letter from a lawyer who worked there and I didn't know anyone, stuff like that, just little details. But you just want to look at all of this stuff. But none of this is impossible, right?
Definitely not. And I think, if you are serious about it, then doing these kind of things is going to show them that you're serious about it. And I think it's actually good for you too to kind of mentally get into the space, this is where I'm going to be and I'm going to take these steps, to make that happen. So if they know you're, let's say, signed up for the bar exam there, that means a lot, actually.
That would be a pretty big sign. If you are applying for jobs and you have not actually planned to take the bar exam in that area, I think that would be a huge red flag for most firms.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think some students, do get the idea like, oh, maybe I'll move with the firm and they'll just take care of the bar exam, the fees, the study time, all of that kind of stuff. And that's the sort of thing where you want to show that you're taking the initiative, not that you just, think they'll figure it out for you.
Yeah, I think all in all, you've got to really be driving this train because you're the one who's doing something that is out of the ordinary here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's get practical about it. So say that you're in this position. You're like, I definitely want to work elsewhere for whatever reason. You do you. We don't care what your reasons are. What can people be doing? I mean, when they're in law school, and then we'll talk later about, after that.
Well, number one is try to get a job in that market 1L year. I think that's the number one most important thing that will show that you want to be there. And I'm assuming that, if we're talking about people who are at that point in their career and still have time to, get a 1L job, that shows that, you took the time to do a summer there.
I think that makes sense. I know someone in law school who did that. She had come from somewhere like Texas and was in school in New York, and she really thought she wanted to work in San Francisco, which is, going to be kind of a hard sell with no connections. And she ended up taking a fairly low paid job with a small firm in San Francisco and got that experience, and then found out, she really liked the area. She liked the market. She made some connections. But then when she was doing her 2L summer interviews and they said, well, how do we know you're serious about San Francisco? She could say, well, I worked there last summer. I took a pay cut to do that, and I know that I really like it.
Yeah, and I think, aside from if, you grew up in this place, like aside from a really strong direct life connection to this other place, I think that having the summer job is like the next, top thing. So yeah, I think that's most important, even if it's unpaid or whatever it is. Yeah. So I would make every effort to do that.
And I think, obviously your second summer job, even more so, you really, really want to try to be in that area. I mean, if if you're a 3L and you haven't and something's come up, like, your significant other needs you to move a place, whatever, like these things happen. But to the extent that you can plan ahead about it, I think you're going to be a lot better off.
Definitely. And I think, it just shows more seriousness than, some kind of tenuous excuse that you could tell people.
Right. Like, I really like surfing. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I had someone once tell me they wanted to be in San Francisco because they were from Brooklyn and they felt like San Francisco was the closest to Brooklyn in terms of like the vibe.
Like, why not just go to Brooklyn?
I mean, it didn't make any sense. And I just thought, it's fine if you don't have a set, connection, but you need to come up with something stronger than that.
I would agree with that. If somebody told me that, I think I would literally be like, why am I wasting my time here? Just go work in New York.
Yeah. And to tell an employer that,
Yeah, I feel like even saying, like, I like skiing would be better than I like Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I was like, what? What does this have to do with anything?
I don't think it's a great idea. The other thing I see people do a lot is, I have this great aunt that lives. Yeah. That's not good. That's not strong. That's not, you have a distant relative. Doesn't matter.
I mean, it's one thing if when you can sell, for example, like, my entire childhood, I spent every summer out here with my cousins and I really always loved it. Okay, fine. But yeah, I have like one great aunt that I've visited twice in my life and who's 102 living in like Walnut Creek. Probably not.
But I'm surprised at how many people go that route.
Well, I think people just want to like kind of draw on anything. But I mean, presumably there is some reason you want to be in this place, right?
Right.
I mean, like what?
Right.
If not, why are you even bothering to go through this?
And I do think actually that's a really important thing to ask yourself too. Where do you really want to be, and what are your reasons that you're, looking for this? Because especially if it's a difficult market, you don't want to just be trying something out and move somewhere else. Certainly, I think you should be serious.
Yeah, certainly not after you're graduated from law school. And, I think decent reasons that people will accept are things like strong family connections, a significant other needs to be there for some specific reason. But you can also frame it in terms of work. Say that you want to do IP work. Okay, well, you can pretty easily sell that in the Bay Area. That might be a harder sell in somewhere like Chicago. It's like you've got to kind of look at what the market is looking for. And then hopefully that's something that you are interested in. And then you can do that fit and say, well, I know that this is one of the best areas in the country to start a career in IP. I mean, who knows if that's true or not? People will probably believe it. And, I'm really serious about doing that. Again, you need to be able to back it up with your actual transcript and what classes you've taken and that kind of thing. But if you can back that up, then that can be a good way to do it. New York, like I want to do financial deals, et cetera, whatever.
Yeah, I think that sounds solid.
All right. And let's talk a little bit about the summer. So, if you are there in the summer, I think you've got to make the most of that time. What should people be thinking about or doing when they're out in this market they want to be in permanently?
Well, as we've said before, I think networking is the most important thing. And so get yourself out there. And I know you'll be busy working during the summer and, busy with your employer. But aside from that, you should be thinking ahead, in terms of, your future career. So some ideas would be definitely find out about the local bar association, and either join it, find out if there's things for law students, if you're still in school, and activities and events, and meet people as much as possible. I think also just kind of figure out within your own network if anyone knows anyone in this area, and kind of reach out and put yourself out there and try to, get to know the market. Let them know that you're specifically looking for a job in this city going forward. So you kind of put that out to people. So I think that's kind of, should be your game plan going into it.
I agree. I mean, if you have time doing a pro bono project, specifically if there's one in the area you're interested in, like again, going back to the family law, you can do like a pro bono case. I mean, you may have a little bit of problems there because you're not going to be there the whole time. But anyway, you can explore opportunities for like one-off type of pro bono things in the area of interest, and you can make some great mentors that way. Or like volunteer days at the local bar association, anything like that. I mean, they tend to have summer activities. So I think getting involved, you can even look later in the fall, maybe if there are local career fairs that you should be attending or should be thinking about. Mm-hmm. But anything you can do just to put yourself out there. I would say maybe some CLEs that you want to go to because people are always chatting around the coffee, and that's a great place to be like, oh, I'm in law school in New York, but I'm here for the summer and I'm really interested in this topic. Do you have any ideas? I think most people, they're pretty open to kind of helping you if you look like you're trying.
Definitely. I think another route to take is to see if there's any alumni, either from your undergrad or your current law school in that city or in the specific, let's say, firm that you want to work at. Because yes, you might reach out to lots of people and not a lot of people get back to you, but I do know that there are plenty of lawyers who are happy to talk to, an alumni who made the effort and reached out to them.
That's a great idea.
And have coffee or something.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I say just as much as possible, put it out there. And if you get one hit off that, that's great.
No, I think that's a great idea. And particularly certain schools have really strong alumni networks. And so, I mean, nobody's going to ever be offended if you reach out to them. They might not respond or they might be busy, but, at least they're going to say, oh, that's, nice. And typically people are willing to help you out.
Yeah. And I think, you need to specifically say, I'm coming from this other market and I'm really trying to work here. So put it out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, if you're not in the city, and you're applying for jobs, I mean, it might help your job hunt to consider coming to this place for a week or two and just putting that in your cover letter when you're applying. Or if you're already applying for jobs, and you're there, or say you're going to be here at Christmas, break, winter break, that kind of thing. I think just making it as easy as possible for people to interview you and talk to you later on in this year is going to make it, easy for you. Yeah. Easier for you to get interviews. I mean, of course, like certain firms will pay for you to fly out there, but then they're looking at an investment. And if it's not a firm, it's going to be on your own dime. So just make it easy for people to talk to you. And I think you're going to have better results.
I also think that particularly shows commitment.
Right.
I think what you're trying to do is give them, signs that you're serious. And I know if I ever saw a student paid their own way to get somewhere and said they'd be there. And even better, let's say said they'd be there like twice this semester, something like that.
Right.
It's like, oh, they really do come here. They really are doing this.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great idea, and it's well worth a plane ticket if you could swing it.
Well, and you could even consider, if you have the time and you're still left in your school, you could even consider maybe doing like one semester at a local school as a visiting student or something. And that's really, again, just going to get you like embroiled more in that local market and give you the opportunity to meet people. So anything you can do, I think showing commitment is a great way to look at it. Just showing you're committed to that market.
Yes.
Obviously.
I also think something to think about in this situation is what is the other market that you're looking at. So, there's a range. So there are other markets where it's not as competitive. And
right.
So maybe you don't have to do as many things. But if we're talking about San Francisco, for example, it's such a hot market that I think you need to go above and beyond.
True.
And do as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think San Francisco is unique because it's a fairly small market and it's also very, very desirable. So, if you're looking at a place that maybe has a lot more jobs, okay, probably this is not going to be a super major issue for you. And you might just have an easier time of it. But yeah, I mean, as we mentioned earlier too, clearly you need to be taking the local bar exam, and you need to make sure you're admitted as soon as possible. So, anything you can do in advance, you want to do that, because it's possible you may not get hired until you are actually admitted. So you want to make sure that you've taken and passed the MPRE, make sure that you've submitted all of your character and fitness, because some of these jurisdictions take a while after you have passed the bar to do all of your other stuff. You may be waiting months, and those are months that you're not getting paid.
Right. And if you put on your resume that you passed the bar, but you don't have a bar number and they can't look you up, they are smart and they're going to know right away that you're not really admitted. And it's kind of going to be, an issue. Is there something wrong?
Right.
Did they not do everything they were supposed to do?
It just depends.
So I agree. Like, the most important thing.
New York is notorious for taking forever. So, you just want to make sure that you're doing everything on your part to make sure that you're admitted as soon as possible, even recognizing that might not be immediately.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, a few random questions that we've gotten on this topic. And you touched on this briefly earlier, but is it ever possible to transfer from one office of a law firm to another? So, you could get hired maybe at the easier local one and then switch. Does this actually work?
It definitely happens. It's definitely a possibility. I don't think it's the best way to go into something with that in mind, because it may not happen. You're definitely not going to be desirable if that's what you tell them they want to do. No summer program wants to, it messes up their numbers if you accept in one place and then you try to start in another place. If it's later on down the line, it's a little bit, more of a possibility, I'd say. But again, it's going to depend on the needs of the office. And I think firms particularly don't like the approach of, like you said, starting in the easier office to get to the more desirable office. That I think is particularly annoying.
And what do you think?
And it's definitely not something you can count on.
What do you think about people splitting their summer between two different locations?
I really don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know that students think it's great. I have a chance to work with different people. And, law firms generally are going away from it, even as a possibility, but some still do it. What I would always say to students is you're not going to get to make the relationships and to learn about the office in the way you will to spend the whole summer. And, summer programs are already getting shorter, so there's already a lot less time. So I would just say, spending 4 weeks somewhere just isn't long enough. And, when they're looking at offers, when they're looking at practice groups, what I've seen happen is, you're in the summer program meeting and people are like, who's that person again?
Who are they?
I don't remember them.
Yeah. I mean, I split one summer and it was a fiasco. I split internationally, and it was definitely the one. I summered 3 different summers, and it was definitely the one that did not go well.
Oh, no.
So, all right, next question. Should you use a local address on your resume and or cover letter?
Well, I think it's helpful if it's real. So, if it's your parents' address legitimately and it's where you grew up, that's okay. But I think that it's confusing. And if you're going to do that, I think you kind of need to say what it is specifically.
Right.
So I think if it's sort of a tenuous connection or is going to be confusing, it's not necessarily going to do you any favors, because it's going to seem like you're sort of fudging things.
Well, and you have to make sure someone's actually checking that mail.
Yes.
So, if you have a mailbox that you never check and they're sending you mail there, not so helpful. Just keep in mind someone might actually do this. I mean, if you really want to make it look good, you could have your local address. You could set up a Google Voice number with a local area code. I mean, again, though, you need to make sure that phone is actually forwarding to your real phone so that you get those messages.
Also, you need to be able to answer the question, what's this address?
Right. Yeah, it's my mailbox.
Yeah.
It's okay, so you're just using Earth Mail or whatever the one is that forwards everything to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be legit.
Think about it. Yeah.
Okay, kind of on that point. Is it ever okay to make up family ties to be in an area where you really want to live?
No, it's never okay.
Yeah, no, that's just not okay. Don't do that. Come up with some other reason. I mean, if you have an imaginary friend or family member who lives in the area, you might want to start wondering why you're actually applying to these jobs. There's got to be a better reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never okay to lie on your resume, your cover letter to the law firm about anything. It's okay to phrase things in a certain way or tell a certain kind of story in a certain way, but you should not lie.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're applying to the legal profession. Generally speaking, lying on your application documents for your job is not a great plan.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, here's the next question. To what extent should you deal with this issue in the cover letter directly?
That is exactly the place to deal with this
Great.
issue. That's what a cover letter's for. No one likes to write cover letters, but and there's certain situations where you're writing cover letters and you're not really saying much. But this is the exact thing that I would say you deal with in a cover letter right off the bat, because that's probably going to be their first question.
Right.
If there's nothing obvious on your resume about why you're going to be there. So, make your case there.
Yeah, and I think even then, I mean, you may think it's obvious from your resume, but some people read the cover letter first, some people read the resume first. You want to make sure everything in your application is pointing the same direction. So whatever piece of the application somebody picks up, they start answering those questions for themselves. Because it just, if you send this random cover letter and you're like, oh, well, everything's in my resume. Those are my favorite cover letters when they're like, please refer to my resume. I'm like, okay, that's not helpful. Thank you. This is really your chance, your opportunity to add something. And so I think if you do have a succinct reason, go ahead and put it in there, because then that just answers one of those questions that they're obviously going to be asking about, like, well, why are we getting this resume from someone who's like totally from a different area that has nothing to do with this area? Like, what is this even about?
Yes, and I will say that this location issue is the first issue that they're always looking at.
Yeah, exactly, of course.
So note that.
It just is what it is. So, I think you want to give, I think for me, when I was coming from a law school in New York and working in Boston as a law clerk, and I was applying in San Francisco, but I made sure to say, I lived in San Francisco for X number of years before I went to law school, and I'm very excited to return there to start my career. And that's all you need to say. It doesn't have to be some huge drawn out explanation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Or whatever your reason is. I really want to do IP work. My, significant other is doing whatever. I don't know. I don't care. Just put something in there that makes sense. I agree.
And you want to make it not convoluted. You want to just, draw a line from here to the city.
Yeah. Why does it make sense for you to be doing this? Okay, great. We can check that box and consider if we want to talk to this person. Yes. All right. Well, our final random question. What if you are at a very prestigious school? So, you're at like a very top school, but you actually want to be in like a rural area or, very secondary, very smaller market for personal reasons. Are people there likely to think that you're too likely to move on to give you a job?
Not necessarily. I think that's going to be a question that, they're going to ask.
Right.
And there's sort of nothing you can do if they just don't believe you.
Right.
And you're telling the truth. So that part's out of your hands. I think that there are things that sort of ring true and ring genuine. So, whatever the reason is for family reasons, or, this has always been a dream of yours, or whatever it is, I think you need to tell your story in a way that they're going to believe you.
Yeah. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in the Bay Area market who maybe were kind of middle or bottom of their class at a school that's not so great. And there's really no chance of them getting a position, particularly not a firm position in the actual Bay Area. But then they start looking at secondary markets in California, Sacramento, Fresno, whatever. And I think they can be successful and people are willing to hire, but you do have to be able to tell that story and make it convincing.
Also, I'd say it's interesting. Some of these sort of secondary markets are becoming more popular just as, bigger markets are getting more expensive. So I think it's a little bit easier these days also to make that case.
That's true. And you can always flatter the people who have decided to have their careers there and say, well, I just think it's so much smarter to start to have your career in Sacramento because like the cost of living is lower. You've got access to all these great recreational activities. You have interesting work from all of the legislative business being done here. I mean, whatever you can make up. And they're like, yes, absolutely. I was really smart to do this. So
I agree.
Always a good strategy. Flatter the person you're talking with. All right. Well, we are wrapping up here. Any final thoughts on this?
Basically that if you want to do this, it's on you, to kind of prove your case. And I would say as much as you can do ahead of time to just answer the questions you know are going to come up, it just makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely.
For them. So they shouldn't be left with anything. Well, what about this? Just deal with all of that going into it. And I think you have a much better shot. And, like we mentioned, if there's anything you can do to show your commitment in a real way, that's the best way to deal with it.
And I'll say from personal experience, even if you're not 100% sure that you want this opportunity, you need to pretend that you are. You should not be expressing because I made that mistake even in San Francisco. Like, well, I think I'm going to come back here, but I don't know, maybe not. This was when I was interviewing for 2L jobs. And not shockingly, they didn't make me an offer. And, I asked somebody why, and they said, well, because we didn't think you were going to actually take it.
And this is an example where I don't think it's lying. I think it's just, framing things in a certain way.
There were just things I shouldn't have said. I should not have been. I should not have been as open. I could easily have sold the story that I was definitely thinking, and I was thinking about it, but I should not have told them I had any doubts about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Learn from my mistakes. Get the summer job you want. Anyway, well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. For more career help, including avoiding mistakes and the opportunity to work one-on-one with us, check out careerdicta.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app, and we'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Allison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.